is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to another great episode on the program, The Bridge, airing on US Arab Radio and also live streaming on Facebook Live. Today, we're talking about a very important topic, women's roles in faith leadership and outreach, 3 religions, 3 perspectives. And with me this morning discussing this timely topic, an important topic, is Ms. Hurunnessa Fariad, Director of Outreach for Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, Dr. Sabrina Dent, the President of the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation, and Cantor Sharon McCord, the Cantor at Congregation of Faith Israel in Charlottesville, Virginia, and co-president for Impact Justice Ministry. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Sahar.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I want to start with a festive note. It is no secret that this month really marks 3 very important religious holidays for Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And people are celebrating, they're celebrating together, and that's a wonderful moment. So I want to start with this festive moment, which really inspired my selection of this topic in the first place. We're celebrating Ramadan, Easter, and Passover this month together. So I want to start with each one of you, please giving me a brief note about how the celebration of this religious holiday this year is different from the 2 previous years when we were really pretty much zooming our celebrations because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Cantor Sharon, would you like to start first, please?
I would be happy to. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. So it is a Passover tradition to welcome people into our homes, to have a Seder. A Seder is a retelling of the story of the Exodus from the perspective of the children of Israel. In the past 2 years, I've had to have my Passover Seder on Zoom online. I would occasionally, because it is very important to share a meal, I would actually drop care packages off to people and they would Zoom into my Seder. This year, I had 12 lovely Charlottesville friends and neighbors and family join in my home for the celebration of Passover this year.
And can you give our listeners and viewers, please, an idea briefly about the Passover feast or celebration itself, briefly, like for those listeners and viewers who may not be necessarily aware of the significance or the importance of this particular celebration in Jewish faith and what it's all about?
Absolutely, absolutely. So during this dinner, it is a dinner where we have several things that we do. We tell the story of the children of Israel who were slaves in Egypt, who through 10 acts of wonder were released from bondage in Egypt and moved to freedom. They escaped and they had to go quickly. And so we have ceremonial foods that we eat that help us tell the story of the bitterness of slavery. We eat matzah all week because matzah is flatbread that didn't have time to rise, to remind us. We reenact as ourselves as if we had left slavery and that we are now free. So it is a celebration of freedom. It is a celebration of independence. Mm-hmm. And we do that through the eyes of a Jewish, a Hebrew lens.
So it does have this traditional historical context, and it's all about liberation and freedom, and also the hospitality in this particular context of the other or the stranger as well. And I think food plays a very important role in all our religious celebrations across all faith traditions. That's for sure. Thank you. I'll move to you, Dr. Sabrina, if you can also give our listeners and viewers a brief idea about Easter. What does Easter mean for Christians? And also, how did you celebrate this year differently from 2021 and 2020, please?
Oh, good. Thank you so much for your question, for this opportunity. So I would say that this is a very significant time of year for many Christians because of the Easter celebration, or as some refer to, like leading up to the Resurrection Sunday. So in April 10th through the 16th, there was Passion Week. And this really commemorates many events that happened as Jesus entered into Jerusalem, riding in on a donkey, and was welcomed by the people. And so it starts with Palm Sunday. So on that particular Sunday, you see a lot of people gather in their churches, and they usually pass out palms for people to have and to wave. That is symbolic of the moment that Jesus entered into Jerusalem. And for those that are not familiar with Passion Week, there are lots of events that occurred during that week in the life of Jesus, that, he went to the temple and addressed the money changers for their corrupt actions. And there was also the Last Supper that took place, which is very significant for Christians because that is continued through the act of, or the ritual of, communion, in terms of that's the last meal that Jesus had with his 12 disciples. But there was also the Sermon on the Mount that took place, which was when Jesus gave the last 8 blessings. And so, and they're often referred to as the Beatitudes. So it's, people may have heard of as, blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. So it's like those are some of the Beatitudes that are there. But so it leads into that Friday, which is often celebrated or honored as Good Friday, because that is the day in which Jesus was crucified or murdered. And so that particular day is when, Jesus was then placed into the tomb. And so there is this silence that takes place on what is that Saturday. And that Sunday, which is identified as Resurrection Sunday, is when the women, which is why it's important that we're talking about women, right? The women were the ones that went to the tomb and found that Jesus' body wasn't there. So historically, like growing up, I grew up in a very Pentecostal household. And so in our Pentecostal tradition, we did receive palms on Palm Sunday. We also, which was significant because on Resurrection Sunday, we would have sunrise service, which started at like 6 a.m. in the morning. And so that was a very significant thing because, again, marking that moment when the women went to the tomb. How I celebrate this time now is very different because I simply identify as spiritual. And so I don't fall within those traditional categories, but I recognize the symbolic nature for me is what the resurrection represents is the rising of hope. And so I have a school-age child. And so I remind him that the resurrection reminds us that there is always hope, that we continue to hope for greater things to happen in our lives. So there are many different ways in which people honor it, and food is a part of it because in many Christian traditions on Easter Sunday, people gather with their families and they have meals. And so that's very significant. Food is a big part of any celebration that is a part of our traditions as well. So you have families that may have gathered and had these feasts. So that's how we honor and celebrate the Easter Sunday, or as some people don't refer to it as Easter Sunday, but Resurrection Sunday.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Hurunnessa, I would like to turn to you. Of course, most of our listeners and viewers are Arab Americans, so they have an idea about Ramadan, but still, I would like to talk a little bit about the significance and the importance of Ramadan as a religious holiday for Muslims. And also, how are you celebrating Ramadan this year differently from the 2 previous years, 2021 and 2020, please?
Thank you so much, Sahar, for having me on. This is a great discussion with women here. So as everybody knows, Ramadan is a month of fasting. It's the month where the Quran was revealed, and fasting is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. But I wanted to focus more on, because a lot of our viewers do know what Ramadan is about, and they themselves are probably fasting as well. I wanted to emphasize on the benefits of Ramadan from a spiritual perspective, because that's the main focus of why we fast, is to build our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and God, and making sure that we're changing things about ourselves during this month, even if it's the smallest change that we can consistently keep in that month, but then also keep throughout the rest of the year and throughout our life. And a lot of people think that Ramadan is just you fast, you pray, and that's it. And then they come out empty at the end, that all I did was fasting. That kind of defeats the point of fasting. Yeah, you were hungry, but that's all you were, right? So we need to make sure that we're connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now it's the last 10 nights of Ramadan, which is considered the last 10 nights, or the third part of Ramadan. It's the time of respite and savior from the hellfire. And so the odd nights are considered nights when we're supposed to stay up at night and pray and ask God for forgiveness, ask God for changes in the world, ask God for anything we want. It's a time to connect. And you have to build these things within yourself and ourselves. We have to make sure that we're constantly in reminder mode when we're doing things throughout the day of how would God see this act? How would God be pleased with me when I'm doing this? And then hopefully when we're out of Ramadan, we're able to keep those things going forward and becoming better human beings. Obviously, during COVID, there were no iftars, and iftar is the time where we break fast at sundown. Everyone was home. No one was going to each other's homes. There were no iftar parties. This year was a bit different. I've been to a lot of iftars. There was like 1 week, it was literally back to back every night. There were iftars that I was invited to, and I went, and it was really weird to see people without masks because we've been so used to it. It kind of seemed like I was in another world, even though that's like the normal way of doing things. And then, you get used to it as well, going in there and not having your mask and people hugging and sitting and, shaking hands. It was very different, but I'm glad that, God is blessing us where we're getting back to normal slowly but surely, so that even that is a reminder for us that God is in control of everything, that we might think that we know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we don't, because when COVID had started, we were told it was going to be 3 months. It's over 2 years, and we're still, dealing with this in so many different ways. So it's a constant reminder that when we're going through all of these things. The other night I went to the embassy of Uzbekistan. We had an interfaith iftar there. That was beautiful. They made their delicious Uzbeki wedding palau, which if you haven't had, you have to have. It's delicious. And, when you break fast from nightfall till morning before the sun rises, you can eat whatever you want. But it's supposed to be healthy. It's not supposed to be full of fried food and overeating. That defeats the whole purpose. So we have to make sure even we're cleansing our body during Ramadan from a lot of the toxins that we've put in it throughout the year. And that's one of the other physical benefits of Ramadan. But the main focus is that spiritual connection with God.
And I think cleaning ourselves of toxins means here, I think, two things, right? Physically, in terms of our own bodies, but also spiritually,
Absolutely.
mentally, and emotionally. We need to also clean our own bodies of any kind of toxics or toxins that we have accumulated throughout the year. And the Imam in our mosque always reminds us that God, who is watching you during Ramadan, is also watching you through the other 11 months of the year. So there is no need to stop your good deeds and your charity and your giving and all your good actions just because Ramadan is over. You should keep this beautiful spirit of Ramadan throughout the rest of the year. And also there is the element of fasting and feasting. I always think of Ramadan as a time of fasting, but also feasting, right? Getting together with people and socializing. And indeed, as the three of you just said now, there is definitely a social aspect to all our religious celebrations. And of course, food is pretty much at the heart and center of our own gatherings and celebrations. And of course, the pandemic has deprived us in the last 2 years of this kind of sense of community in the actual sense. We were all on social media and all, Zooming and on Skype. It's not the same like hugging each other and being together, without masks and being in the same space and celebrating together. So thank you so much for giving us these ideas about these great religious holidays and also how it's different this year from the 2 previous years during the pandemic. We'll come back to this important and timely discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you. Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. We're talking today about women's roles in faith leadership and outreach, 3 perspectives from 3 religions. And with me this morning discussing this topic is Cantor Sharon McCord, Dr. Sabrina Dent, and Ms. Hurunnessa Fariad. So Hurunnessa and Dr. Sabrina, together with also a third partner with you, Rabbi Schenkman, you created a very interesting and very important initiative, which was a podcast called Sisters Act, right? And Sisters Act is this podcast that has a Jewish, Christian, and Muslim woman together. And for me, I was like, wow, that is something I would really, really like to talk about in my show. So I want to start with you, Dr. Sabrina. Just give us a brief idea about how did this idea of Sisters Act podcast start and what it's all about.
Right. So the Sister Act podcast actually started because of Hurunnessa Fariad. She's the founder of the podcast. And so I joined the podcast during the pandemic in, I think it was September of 2020, I joined. And it's an opportunity for women of different religious identities to come together and talk about life, faith, and resilience. And what we found in our podcast experience together, even though we were virtually, that we have so much in common and there's so much that brings us together. And so there are many topics that we've explored on the podcast, some that are very lighthearted and others that are very heavy in nature, but necessary to talk about because no matter where we come from, as women, we have things that bring us closer together that we can relate to and relate through the experiences of how we've navigated life and how like our faith has helped us to get to the other side of some very difficult moments, but even how our faith has propelled us in celebrating good times in our lives. And so it's been an honor to be a part of the podcast podcast with Hurunnessa and Rabbi Sue. And like I said, we found so many things in common that we have, but also the fact that we don't overlook the fact that there are some differences, and we still value the differences that we have, because that allows us to learn from one another and with one another as individuals and women. And so I found that it has helped me to grow as a woman and as an interfaith leader. And so I'm just delighted to be a part of this incredible opportunity to share with others our experiences and to really share them unapologetically. That's the thing, is we don't apologize for who we are as people. And I think that is so important.
Yes, thank you. I love this unapologetic part. And Hurunnessa, thank you so much for taking the lead and the initiative in creating and putting together this podcast. Can you please tell me what motivated you in the first place to create this quote unquote Sisters Act? I love the name, Sisters Act podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sahar. Yeah, so working in multi-faith, interfaith world as women, you can agree with me, and it doesn't matter what faith you're coming from, is that there usually isn't space for women. And we technically at times will have to nudge men out of the way. And me being from New York City, I will do that unapologetically. I will bring it up because we're tired of having to be at events for trophy appearances, yet no one listens to what we have to say. No one asks us to speak. It's usually manuals up on the stage telling us about our faith or telling us about women's rights and who we're supposed to be or how we're supposed to be. And I realized that, well, if you're not going to give me space, I'll create space myself. And so I decided to start the podcast. And as Sabrina so eloquently put what we do on the podcast, and you can see why I picked her to join us. She's an amazing woman. And Rabbi Sue is another amazing woman that I have been friends with both of them before I started the podcast. So we had a relationship from before, but I really wanted people to see faith through the lens of women. And women who are friends, women who are from 3 different faith backgrounds, who have different approaches in life, who see things differently, yet we go through so many of the same things and we love each other for that. Even outside of the podcast, we have a group chat that we talk about things that are going on in our private life. And, you know, I get their opinion on things, they get my opinion, and we know what's going on. And those are the things that change people to bring about peace throughout the world. And I wanted to showcase that narrative that women are peace builders. And through this example, we can show people exactly how women from 3 different faith backgrounds or even scholarly work that we do is so important, and it can be done. And we're going to set that example.
Absolutely. I did look at some of your episodes of the podcast, and yes, some of it is lighthearted, but some of it is very, very serious as well, right? Like, for example, you discussed issues like related to violence against women and harassment against women. Can you comment, briefly about why these topics in particular were raised in this particular podcast? What is the significance? What message are you trying to get across to your own audiences or listeners?
Well, you can see throughout history, especially I'll speak on the Muslim woman's perspective, that Muslim women across the world in history have always been put in a place to stay quiet if they're being abused, that somehow it's the man's right to abuse them. And they've used Islamic text and the Quran out of context to support these things in violating women's rights and pushing women to be underneath men or having no say and not telling them about their rights. And these are rights that God has given us, but you don't hear about it because, again, it's dominated by a group of people who don't want women to know about their rights. And I'm not saying this happens everywhere, but it has happened enough where we see it trickle down to our generation of Muslim women. And this happens in the other faith groups as well. And we have to address these things because they do happen and they're wrong. And they're things that are violating people's rights. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in Surah Nisa that you have to fight for justice, even if it's against yourself. Now, imagine getting to that point of self-reflection where if you're violating someone, you can sit back and say, hey, I'm doing wrong to someone. I need to stop and I need to reflect and I need to change. So if we're told to stop doing oppression from our own selves. Imagine what we who watch these things, who see these things, would have to question for if we don't bring it to the public square and talk about it and let people know that these types of abuse, any type of abuse, is not acceptable and it's not faith driven. And we need to stop using faith as an excuse to promote violence and hate and abuse.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I love this idea of the, the manels, which is like, an all male panel, right? So whenever I see that, I always call it out, right? If I get an invitation to an event and all the men are speakers, I say, where are the women? Here is a list of women who can be excellent guests or speakers for this particular event. And I recommend their names. And I remember that me and you, Hurunnessa, we were together one time on a panel, which means an all-female panel. All the participants were women, and we loved the experience of talking about ourselves and our experiences in an all-women's panel. Cantor Sharon, I want to get also your perspective on women's role in terms of faith leadership. You're a woman who is playing a leadership role in your own community, in your own faith community, and women are new to this type of faith leadership. What is the significance and importance of women being in this position of quote unquote faith leadership?
A great question. I may actually ask you to repeat it because I just wanted to say very quickly before I address the answer to that question. Our story, our Torah, is filled with stories about men, our patriarchs, and there are very few women. Women get very little face time in the Torah, but there are some, and when they do appear, Miriam, Moses' sister, she is a unifier. She is a bringer of water. She sings and dances and brings joy. There's Devorah, a judge who listens and sits and makes wise decisions and helps society. And then there's Ruth, who comes from another faith tradition, who is faithful and loving to Naomi, who adopts her and accepts a life of very little materially, but she just shows such grace and loyalty. So, loyalty, joy, and honor and loving. This is what women bring to Torah. And now getting to your question, I was one of the very first people in my hometown growing up to have a bat mitzvah, being entered into the covenant. Before that, women sat in the back behind a curtain. They were not allowed to pray. Their work was in the home, raising children, lighting candles, knowing exactly how to cook the meals, keeping your kitchen kosher. And that it's an important role because they were in charge of raising good children. But we are so much more than women. Women are so much more than that. And only in the past 50 years or so have women been able to step out of their homes and into leadership. The first women rabbis were just within the past 50 years. And as a cantor in my community, I am able to lead both men and women in worship. I am able to learn. I have access to the same knowledge that the gentlemen have, even though so many of those sources are still men. Are the great rabbis of old, the only ones that are published, the only ones that we learned from, our sages, are men. So we have to as women scholars and leaders, we have to reimagine and reinvent what was the role of the woman? What were the women thinking? And how did they adapt? And how did they live those lives? There's nothing written down. There's no Talmud or oral Torah of women in Jewish faith tradition. So it is upon us to remake our liturgy, to remake our the new writings, and to be out there and to show that women's faith and women's values are very important and very strong through the Jewish lens.
Absolutely, I cannot agree more. And I think that women need to be at the table. They need to be at the table of peace building, peacemaking, reconciliation, interfaith dialogue, faith leadership, you name it. And I always say, if women are not at the table, they will be on the menu. And women have been on the menu for a very long time. So it's time for them to be at the table as change makers and as peacemakers. We'll come back to this very important discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frikeh, hoisin, grape leaves with steak, mishawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985. When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
بعد تطعيم أكثر من 3 بلايين شخص حول العالم بشكل كامل بلقاح كوفيد-19، تمت الآن الموافقة على تلقيح الأطفال من عمر 5 إلى 11 سنة. فقد أثبتت الدراسات بعد تجارب سريرية مع أطفال حول العالم أن جرعتي اللقاح المخصصة لهم آمنة وفعالة. يوصي الأطباء بتلقيح الأطفال من سن 5 فما فوق من أجل حماية الأصحاء منهم أو ذوي الظروف الصحية الصعبة. الطفل جزء من المجتمع وهو معرض لأن يصاب بالفيروس، ويمكن أن يحمله لعائلته ولمن حوله. احمي طفلك وعائلتك ومجتمعك. لقح طفلك ليكون بأمان في المدرسة أو مع العائلة والأصدقاء وأثناء ممارسة الرياضة. تحدث لطبيبك واكتشف الحقائق بنفسك، أو زر موقع michigan.gov/kidscovidvaccine. رسالة من وزارة الصحة والخدمات الإنسانية في ميشيغان.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. We're having another great discussion and conversation on The Bridge today about women's roles in faith leadership and outreach, 3 perspectives from 3 religions. And with me this morning discussing this topic are Cantor Sharon McCord, Dr. Sabrina Dent, and Ms. Hurunnessa Fariad. So before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about the importance and the significance of women's role in terms of faith leadership, in terms of outreach. And that's really a very important topic. I would like to hear more about it from our two other guests. So Dr. Sabrina, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on why women's role is very central in terms of outreach and also in terms of, I would say, interfaith and intrafaith, right? Dialogue. Like we always talk about interfaith. What about intrafaith? Like even within our own faith traditions, there are different sects, different groups. How is women's role particularly very important in these particular domains?
Right. Dr. Khamis, it is so critical that people understand the contributions that women have made over time to all of our faith traditions and even in society. And as Cantor McCord pointed out, like a lot of times the stories that are raised are those that are centered around men. And one of the things I was very intentional about saying when I was talking about the Easter celebration was that the women were the ones that brought the good news. It was the women that started that process. And if you recall, for those that are familiar with the text, there was no mention of the men at the time, right? When this happened. So it goes to show like women are present and women have a way of bringing a different perspective and moving things forward that not only includes us, but the entire community. So I think it's important. And that's one of the things that I'm thinking about in this moment, even thinking about womanist scholars, womanist theologians, that, you know, the perspective, especially through the Black tradition, that womanist thinkers are concerned about the entire community and holding them in care, not just one group of people. And what we've seen historically is that, unfortunately, when men are in position, they're thinking about the power that they can attain to maintain their rights. And we have to even look at historically here in the United States, how things were structured is that men were given rights that women were not given. And so in our faith communities, the same thing has translated. There have been times when in the Christian tradition, women have come forward to say that they have been called to ministry, and, you know, a pastor may say to them, no, you're more suited to be the Sunday school teacher, or you're more suited to do this in terms of the hospitality community. And the reality of it is women can do those things and do those things well, but we have so much more to offer. And so in the interfaith community, I think it's important that, you know, that women's voices are heard and that women are given space. Now, here's the thing that we must recognize in this is that there have been times when there are men that have made space for women to be and to move forward. I'm a testament to that in my leadership role at the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation as the president. It was Dr. Corey D.B. Walker who came to me and said, I believe that you're our next president for this organization. So here you have a moment where there was a man that, you know, sees what women bring in terms of contributions to a conversation to try to move us forward. And I think once we as women are in those roles, it is our responsibility to continue to make space and not continue those patriarchal practices of trying to hold people in certain spaces to say, no, you can't elevate higher than that. It's important that we're having these conversations within our own religious communities to disrupt those historical narratives and actions that have continued to leave us out. But it's also important that we elevate that in the community as well, and look at the contributions that women have made in terms of various issues, no matter whether we're talking about housing, no matter whether we're talking about environmental justice, if we're talking about reproductive freedom, like look at the contributions that women have made and have done it courageously. I think when you're in a position where you've had so much taken from you, then you know what it feels like to be marginalized. So you only want to do what is right. At least most people want to do what is right to elevate the next person and to bring all of community into care. And so that is part of even the work that I'm doing at the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation. We're looking at the beloved community, the whole beloved community. I'm talking about people that are religious and non-religious, because the thing is, every person matters. And so women provide a different narrative and a shift. And as we've seen, even in the public square here recently in the United States with the confirmation of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, right? And also the Vice President Kamala Harris, is that it gives hope for women to break glass ceilings, to break barriers that have historically, where it's been said that, no, you're not welcome into this space. You don't have anything to contribute to this space. And I think that it inspires women and it inspires girls, but also it should inspire our young boys. I'm the mother of a teenage son. So he looked at this and saw like, wow, like, you know, there are so many possibilities for anyone. And I think that women have a way of teaching that invites people, invites men, boys, and girls to learn and look at things differently. And I think that is important, is that there has to be a shift in thinking. And so we provide that because we're also, women are multi-talented and creative in those ways. So, so we just do that.
And we do a lot of multitasking as well.
Yes, we do.
It's very good in terms of multitasking. You're doing gazillions of things at the same time. But I totally agree with you that the experience of oppression is intersectional, right? It involves gender, race, ethnicity, religion, color. You know, we have to be aware of all of these, you know, intersectional and multi-layered levels of oppression in our own work. And Hurunnessa, I'll come to you with the very same question, because that's at the heart of our discussion. What do you think that women can really bring to the table when they become, you know, faith leaders and interfaith leaders and, you know, outreach coordinators and people who are caring for their own community?
I think there's a different dynamic when you see women doing this type of work than men. And, you know, like Sabrina, I too am in a position where I do this work because of a man. Imam Majid, whom most of you probably know, he's the executive imam of the Adam Center, where I worked for 12 and a half years. I just resigned at the last in March. He was always building me up. There would be events, he would have me go, and he would tell me himself, he's like, I don't trust anybody else speaking on Muslims, on Islam than you. You're going to go and speak. He never said, oh, you're a woman, no, we're not going to send you. You know, like, I need to find a guy. He would always have me go and speak, and getting that experience and having been in these spaces and knowing that the kind of conversations we have as women is so robust. And like you said, when it comes to multitasking, we look at things outside of just a conversation. We look at the problem, we see how we can fix it. We tap into people who can actually help us fix it. And then we help that community get that issue resolved. And then we move on to the next thing, right? Women have in historical references, even during the Prophet ﷺ's time, of our Prophet Muhammad, women were active players in every role there was. There was no time where he ever said, well, no, we're leaving the women out of this. You don't have a say. Women were scholars. You know, over 2,000 of the traditions of our Prophet were narrated by his wife and documented. They were teaching other people about the ways of how the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, would interact with people, would deal with injustice, how he felt about things, and how his daily life was so simplistic. And so if it weren't for these women passing on these traditions, we wouldn't have the information that we have now, that all men, women, and children benefit from. And the rights that Islam gives to women, whether it's the right to inheritance, the right to choose our spouse, the right to divorce, the right to keep our income to ourselves. But if we want to help our husbands, it's considered charity. There's so many rights that we have as women, but we don't talk about these things. We don't expand on them, again, because when there's a lack of knowledge and lack of exposure of these sayings and the Quranic rulings that are there, we end up going through culture. And culture, when culture oversees religious texts, then it becomes a problem. But then the other problem is that the world will see it as the religious text, right? When religion completely says the opposite. So we have to be very careful in that we're promoting what our religions say about the rights of women and how women need to be part of the conversation. And the other simplistic answer is like, we're the other half of the species. I mean, how do you make rulings and decisions and leaving the other half out? We didn't come from another planet. We're in this together. So I've seen organizations that have women in leadership positions soar, because we're able to see things outside of the box. We're able to give more of our time, and even women in leadership positions will take out the plates and put them on the table. They will put the tablecloth, they will put the spoons and things. They don't look at themselves as like, I'm above and beyond this. We need to get the job done. And I've seen that working with all women from all different faith groups. We don't sit there and say, that's beneath me, I'm not going to do it. But we need to also be mindful that we have to have the space for them. And when we have male allies who are doing these things, it just showcases to the world even more of the possibilities, how we can better address issues of peacemaking in the world and working with one another from different faith groups, addressing oppression. What does that look like? How do we interact with our children? I have 4 daughters. How do I now become a role model to them when they see me doing all the things I'm doing? And on top of that, I'm a single mom, and I've been father for the past 8 years. So how do my children view me in that perspective? We have to be open to these things and making sure that we have women at the table, and that we're, again, we're here, we're not going anywhere. You can't make decisions without us being there, helping you, along the way.
Absolutely. Women are half of society, and they give birth to the second half. I always say that in all my talks. And also, I always face this situation where people say, oh, but Islam, is an oppressive religion to women. And I said, 1400 years ago, Islam gave women rights that they do not enjoy even now in the year 2022. Believe it or not, the right to divorce herself, to keep her own money, to have economic freedom,
the right to vote.
To have a voice, all of these things, like equal payment, equal rights. It's a shame that women do not know about a lot of these rights. And here's the important part: education and awareness. We have to educate our new generation, I would say, of young men and young women equally, because they're partners and allies, right? Men are not our enemies, they are our partners and allies, and they have to really play this kind of supportive role that I think more than one of you talked about, in terms of trying to really help women to be at the table and to have a voice. And women themselves also have to help themselves to be at the table and to have a place and to have a role to play in terms of decision making and in terms of outreach and serving the community. And it's important to distinguish between religion and tradition. I always say religion is one thing, tradition is another. So we cannot blame Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, or any other faith tradition, really, for that matter, for certain social practices that have been passed from one generation to the next, because many times it's the fault of tradition, but not religion. We'll come back to this important discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Imagine you're on a train track somewhere miles away. A train is headed your way. You can't see it yet, but it's coming, slowly but surely. If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may be on the wrong track, and diabetes could be heading your way. Bit by bit, the danger is getting closer and closer. So should you stay on the track you're on now, or move to make a change and reduce your risk? If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may qualify for the National Diabetes Prevention Program in your local community. This one-year program could be the ongoing support you need to put you on the right track. Not only did participants lose weight, they cut their risk of type 2 diabetes in half. Ready to get on board for a healthier future? Learn more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program and what else you can do to manage and prevent diabetes at michigan.gov/diabetes. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937. Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Najee Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Najee Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Najee Abood, 734-744-9796.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we're talking today about women's roles in faith leadership and outreach. 3 perspectives from 3 religions, and my guests today are Cantor Sharon McCord, Dr. Sabrina Dent, and Ms. Hurunnessa Fariad. Dr. Sabrina, briefly, because we have a few minutes left in our program, and I still have a lot to talk about with all of you, I think we'll have to have you again on the show in the near future to finish our discussion. But I want to talk about the theme of social justice. This is something that I've seen also across the work of all 3 of you, really. But I want you to talk, to us briefly about not just the importance of women's role when it comes to interfaith leadership and outreach, which we have been talking about already, but also the leadership in terms of bringing about social justice and religious freedom. These are 2 things that I think your work has been focusing on a lot, in your own career. So if you can just briefly give our listeners and viewers an idea about the importance and significance of women's contributions and role in the realm of social justice and religious freedom.
Yes. So as was previously stated by both of the other panelists, is that, women, we have a different way of looking at things and bringing topics to light or issues to light in ways in which they have not been thought about historically. And so in our work, historically, I've worked in the religious freedom field for many years. And so religious freedom has been talked about through the lens of really a white male heterosexual perspective, and historically through the lens of how people have known it from what was written in the First Amendment. And so the reality of it is there are many other perspectives that racial and religious minorities can bring to light as far as their experiences with not having full access to religious freedom in this country and as well as around the world, right? But and looking at it through a social justice lens, it's reimagining, talking about religious freedom and how religion, and unfortunately right now in the United States, Christian nationalism has been a major issue. And so just so people are aware that that is different from Christianity, that Christian nationalism is a small group of individuals that have made this concerted effort to say what it means to be an American is to be, what it means to be an American means that you have to be Christian or adopt those ideals or vice versa, or you have to be patriotic in a certain way. And that's not what it means to be American. understand that everyone has the right to freedom of conscience, freedom of belief. And so, but when you have people that have those ideas that then translate that into public policies that impact how women are able to have access to healthcare or reproductive services, or even just in employment services, that is very problematic. And so to have women in this field to say, okay, I need you to look at this differently. I need you to understand how your religious beliefs and ideologies are being put on to me, and how I'm going to manage my body, or how I'm going to show up in the world, or who, and in many cases, who I am to love. Like, there are so many different ways in which that we've seen this be a problem in the United States in terms of pieces of legislation that has come forward. And so women, again, bring a different perspective to these conversations to say, no, my human rights are my human rights, right? Is that, your right to have that belief stops at you when it infringes upon my right. Now, men have been a part of this conversation, but again, women bring different perspectives because we could talk about our experiences. And I'll give one quick example. For Black women have historically in this country, if you go back in history, like how we were used as projects and experiments for modern day gynecology. And it was said that Black women didn't experience pain. And so fast forward, when you have a higher number of Black women that experience problems when they go to the emergency room in terms of the access to care that they might receive, or the fact that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than any other group because of how we have been historically treated and currently treated. Like those are, so when you're talking about many issues that impact us and our health, we're going to bring a different perspective and bring those realities in the conversation when we're talking about religious freedom and our right to be, to live, exist, and thrive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And before we end, I just want to quickly talk about the role of music and art. So Cantor Sharon, if you can quickly tell us, first of all, what is the role of a cantor and why is music so important when it comes to religion and spirituality? In maybe less than 2 minutes, if you can, please.
I'll do my best. Okay. So just like a rabbi is the holder of Jewish law, of halakha, a cantor is a holder of ritual and musical Jewish act and Jewish prayer. And so a cantor is responsible for holding that knowledge and sharing it and expressing it through ritual and through liturgy in the community. You can set your watch, you can set your calendar based on the modes of music that you hear in prayer. If you hear certain melodies associated with prayers, oh, that is a morning liturgy, or that's a weekday liturgy, or that's Shabbat, or that's high holidays, or that's one of the 3 festivals. So there's very specific music ritually for that, and that has come down through the millennia. But that's only one part of what it is to be a cantor. A cantor also is a composer, an arranger, and a unifier. They bring music to worship. They start with a nigun, a wordless melody, to bring people at the beginning of a service. People come from all different places with their heads in different places. You sing a nigun that digs into your heart, and it brings everybody together in one place, in one spirit, able to pray together. We are teachers. We are kavanot givers. We give of our spirit, of our learning, and we create an environment, a holy environment for prayer and for love. And music brings joy, simcha, zmirot. They're all beautiful. It's about beauty and love and unification.
And that's what we exactly need in today's world: beauty and love and unification and coming together in one space. I know that Hurunnessa, you've been also the leader of the first Muslim choir with the young men and women at Adams. I hope you're going to continue this work forward, and moving forward, that we're going to have another maybe Muslim choir that you're also going to lead, and maybe you're going to have another program, especially for this discussion about music in faith. But for now, I have to thank the three of you very much for your contributions to your communities and also for being my valued guests today. And thanks so much to all our listeners and speakers. Stay in peace. Thank you so much. Take care and goodbye.